Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing. I'm Sean Martin and I'm joined today by Alison McConnell. How's it going, Alison?
Very well, thank you. It's always nice to see the sun shining in Glasgow.
Hopefully it's shining in Holland tomorrow. So another week, another European preview. It feels like we do these every week. So let's get straight into that. I suppose first and foremost, AZ, Alkmaar, Alison, would you reckon many changes for that trip?
I don't think there'll be too many changes in terms of personnel and the team that starts, but I do think it's still quite a finely balanced tie. I think Celtic will be pleased with the 2-0 scoreline, but I think it's still quite precarious ahead of a second leg. I think it was an odd game. I think at times, it was a bit of a roller coaster game in terms of the chances created. I think Alkmaar showed that they have a threat in terms of what they offer in attack, and I think it might be quite testing for Celtic tomorrow night. I don't think it will be a straight progression into the group stages. I think one goal really changes the complexion of the tie either way. I think if Celtic had to go out and score the first goal tomorrow night, I think it makes it much more comfortable and assured. However, if the converse happens and it's Alkmaar who take the first goal, I think it really affects the whole balance of the tie. So it's still fairly precarious, I would say.
I mean, there's been plenty of positive performances from the likes of Christie, Edward, Abada. The other day as well. I mean, you've also got Forrest and Rogic, neither of whom started against St Mirren. So, in terms of team selection, if I can bug you for one, what would you think he'll go for middle to front, really?
I think it's a hard one. I think my gut feeling is that Tom Rogic will come back in. I think he was maybe rested at the weekend with a view to this week, to tomorrow night's game and then the game at Ibrox on Sunday. I think he'll play a part in both of them. I think obviously McGregor and Turnbull will stay in. I don't think you can take out a boy who scores a hat trick at the weekend. I think he's fairly certain of his place. And then I think it gets a bit more complicated. I think in terms of the front three, I think Furuhashi obviously starts too. For me, I think again rested with an eye on this week and the magnitude of the week that it is. I think Abada will probably start, and then it's really between Forrest and Christie. I'm not entirely sure what it will be, but I would suspect that Furuhashi would start, and I think possibly Christie and Abada.
Do you think, I mean, you've kind of answered this already, but I suppose you don't think there's any chance that Ange goes for a more defensive-minded midfielder instead of Tom Rogic in particular, or even Christie instead of Rogic in the middle?
No, it's a consideration, and I would only base this on comments made and the kind of philosophy that he wishes to stick to. I don't think he will compromise on a more pragmatic approach. Now, I base that only on the chat that we've all heard over the last 6 or 7 weeks or so, but I think he'll stick to his own philosophy of wanting to win games by playing in a certain style. I would qualify that by saying that I think Callum McGregor will play in that deep lying position just to offer some protection to the back four, but I think he will probably go with an eye on attack, knowing that one goal scored in a 3-0 lead really makes it a far more comfortable evening. And I think just based on everything that we've heard about Ange Postecoglou's idealism in terms of the football he wants to play and the football he wants to watch, I wouldn't anticipate a deviation from that.
I agree with you. I've done an article that went up this morning on the kind of midfield options, and frankly, I can't see, actually, no harm to James McCarthy or Nir Bitton or Ismail Assoro, but I just can't see the justification for Callum McGregor not playing in that single pivot role. I mean, you can play him further forward, you can play him further forward, but I just think the way that he plays that role is just so key to the way that you've just described the way that Ange wants to play football. So I just don't see him not playing there, which means further forward, Turnbull, as you say, scored a hat-trick. Can't really drop him now, if it was even a consideration before. So the only one I could see potentially, whether it's actually dropping out or whether it's just being rotated, maybe starting one of the two games, would be Rogic. But it would only be for Christie for me. I don't see it being for any other kind of more defensive-minded midfielder. I just don't think he'll do that. I don't know if you agree with that, or if it's just Rogic will start both games for you, do you think?
I completely agree with you. I absolutely hear what you're saying. I'm not sure if Rogic will start both games, but I definitely think he'll have a part to play in both games. I suspect he will start tomorrow night. And I think what happens tomorrow night might also colour just what the team selection is for Sunday's game too. I think it sets a tone ahead of the first derby at Ibrox. I think so much is linked into what will happen tomorrow night. But like you, I think Callum McGregor has had an impeccable start to the season. I think it's all the more impressive given the fact he came in on the back of a European Championships campaign. He's not had a huge amount of rest. I think we all know his stats in terms of the last 4 or 5 seasons and the amount of games that he's played and the amount of minutes that he has in his legs. But I think he's looked very comfortable, more than comfortable in that role, and I think he's been pivotal to Celtic. I think he offers so much just in terms of linking play, and his composure on the ball I think is so notable. I think the calmness when under pressure is notable, and I don't think you could speak highly of him. I don't think there's any question that he'd be one of the first names on the team sheet at the minute.
I mean, you used the term kind of protection for the back four. Do you agree it's like it's not a traditional kind of defensive midfielder protection? It's more advanced than that. It's a more intelligent kind of protection than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it to thirds and stuff.
Yeah, there's obviously like it's a bit more sophisticated than that. I think there's an element of the link up play and I think he has the intelligence to do that, as what the game intelligence to do that, obviously, as well as the ability to do it.
A quick word on the defence. I don't think either of us expects it to change at all from what it's been the past few games. Am I right in saying that?
I'm not sure that there are too many options to change it, to be honest. I think there are certain limitations in terms of personnel and just how you could set up and how you could alter it. So I think it picks itself, to be fair. I think we've spoken about this already. I think Anthony Ralston has done particularly well under a considerable amount of pressure in recent weeks. I don't think he's done anything to suggest that he deserves to go out of the team. So, yep, I think the back line essentially would remain the same.
Do you think, just because you mentioned Ralston there, were you surprised, or was it maybe just too soon for the kind of people that were saying to stick a Scotland call up there? I'm and Stephen Welsh, actually, the two of them.
To be honest, I think it probably is a bit too early. I think you have to be consistent. I think if we get beyond the first qualification phase and there's still a same level of performance, then I think definitely what you'll hear is a growing chorus for inclusion. But I think if you go back to just a month ago and the kind of lack of confidence and the criticism that was coming towards him, I think maybe the best thing is just to try and build on the foundations that he's set over the last few weeks and just concentrate on sustaining that level of form, and then I do think it does come.
I think that's only common sense for me anyway. Is as much as he's impressed the last few weeks, it has only just been the last few weeks. So I'm probably in agreement that it is too soon for that, and it needs to be a longer period of sustained excellence, if you want to put it that way. I think I could make an argument that Stephen Welsh maybe deserves it quicker than Ralston does. He was in the team obviously last year. He didn't blow me away when he was in the team last season, but there was also other moving parts chopping and changing around about him. But since this pre-season, I've been really impressed with him so far, and I think that will come for him as well.
I think he's moving in the right direction. I think there's a change in confidence levels. I think he looks much more assured. I don't know if maybe some of that comes with playing alongside a more experienced centre half. I think certainly there's been a level of assurance in his performances that we maybe didn't always see last season. But sometimes I think that's reflective in terms of the tone and the atmosphere of the team. And throughout the team, I think you could, last season, to walk into the Celtic lineup, it would have been fairly chaotic in itself. I think there was a considerable amount of pressure. I don't think it would have been the easiest environment to come into. I think the tone is now slightly different. I think what you've seen over the last 5 or 6 weeks would facilitate a move, just because the confidence levels throughout that team have altered significantly.
Just behind Just behind Stephen Welsh, Santi Ralston, Carl Starfelt, Greg Taylor, there's Joe Hart. He obviously pulled off a couple of saves in the first leg against AZ, and we've got a comment here just pointing that out, that the last game could have easily ended up different if it wasn't for Joe Hart's influence. How important do you think he's going to be tomorrow night again?
I think what he brings, aside from the experience that he offers, I think you have a level of leadership that Celtic have maybe missed. I think what was notable for me in that game wasn't just his saves when the tie was still balanced, and I think it was still 0-0 the one that he tipped onto the post. But I think if you go back to watch the highlights, if you look around I think it's maybe the 84th or the 85th minute or so, and there's a substitution, and he goes over and he's speaking to the manager, and he's speaking to the bench, and he's just having a discussion about how they're setting up to close the game out. And I think that can be so vital. I think just being vocal, I think just being able to talk people through things is helpful. And to go back to your point about Stephen Welsh, I think he's probably benefited enormously from that, and knowing that Hart is behind him, I suspect he's probably in his ear for the full game. And I think Celtic lacked that last season. I think also too the continuity of knowing that there's a regular backline, it seems to be the same faces, it's the same goalkeeper. I think all of that breeds a confidence too.
I think you and Tony will obviously talk about this more tomorrow, but I'm still going to bug you for a score prediction if you want to give me one. As you said, 2-0 is a precarious lead, but there's no away goals. So,
do you know, I'm going to go for Celtic to win 2-1. I think what you can say just now and what you're seeing just now is a team that have goals in them. They will create chances. They have players who are capable of converting chances. They've been very clinical in recent games. We all know the stats now, the 24 goals from the last 6 games. So I think it augurs well in terms of what you can produce middle to front. I do still think that they can be vulnerable defensively, and I think Alkmaar will ask questions of them in that regard. But I think I'll go for 2-1 Celtic.
Any goal scorers?
Oh, come on. You want to go stick a tenner on this? I'm going to go for Furuhashi and Abada.
No, I think I agree with you. I think they will concede, but I mean, we've said that a couple of times now. I've got every faith that they'll go into a game thinking they'll score at least a couple these days, and I think that will be no different tomorrow night. So I probably will agree with you. I'll go 2-1. Just not to agree with you, I'll go 3-1. But I think Kyogo is nailed on to score. I just think the fact that he didn't score it in a 6-0 win will just bug him so much that he'll go out there with just a man on a mission to score. But anyway, right, so you and Tony will talk more about that tomorrow, I'm sure. What else you will probably talk about, but we're going to talk about it now, is the news that broke last night that Rangers have had a COVID outbreak ahead of their trip to Armenia to face Alkmaar, and obviously Celtic's trip to Ibrox on Sunday. We don't know who that might rule out yet, as far as I know, but what do you make of that situation in general?
It's interesting, isn't it? I thought Rangers were one of the very few clubs last season who came through unscathed by all the COVID problems. I think Celtic were very badly hit at times. I think obviously the aftermath of Dubai, and even going back beyond that, if you look at the first derby of the season last year when I think Christie had to miss it after being deemed to be a close contact when he'd been in Scotland duty, it seemed to be a debilitating problem at times for many teams last season. I think Rangers have had isolated spells of individual players being out, but I think if there's a crop, it's a headache. I think once it's within the squad, it can be very difficult to contain. I'm sure their perception would be that it's come at the worst possible time, just in terms of the magnitude of the week that is, and the fact it sets a tone for the rest of the season. And of course, if you're looking at it from a Celtic perspective, then you would want to go and exploit that and exploit any opportunity that it gives you.
I mean, if it is a fair few first-team regulars, for instance, that probably makes sure Celtic won't lose at Ibrox. Prediction seem a wee bit safer then, isn't it?
Well, I think you would have to reserve judgment until to wait to see teams. And again, I would go back to that point about not losing. My my philosophy and my prediction comes purely on the fact that this is a team that look capable of scoring goals every time they go onto the park. I think that the philosophy that seems to be implemented is an old throwback. It seems to be like the Jock Stein mantra of if someone scores 2, we'll score 3. So I think, I'm not sure that gung-ho would be a fair assessment, but certainly there is a predilection to play middle to front and to use attack as a best form of defence. So what I would say about my prediction of not losing at Ibrox comes down to the fact that I think this is a team who will always respond in moments of adversity. They look capable of still going and responding and scoring goals.
No, I think I agree with you there. I mean, I don't think it's gung-ho either, because that implies it's like they don't really think about it, they just pile forward. And like I made the comparison after the first leg that if like, a lot of people were saying, oh, he'll go down swinging with his philosophy and comparing it to my boxer and stuff, and I was going, right, well, he's not just a slugger, he doesn't send his team out to just hope that they'll land something. They know what they're doing. They do it in a, all right, it's relentless, but it's still a controlled manner, the way that the fullbacks come in, the way that they move for passing options and stuff. There's a lot of sophistication to it. It's not just gung-ho, as you say. So in that respect, it would be interesting to see, no matter what first team players, if there are any from Rangers that are out, just how they deal with that kind of football being played in their own kind of stadium with their own fans there, potentially getting on top of them if they've not got much of the ball. Not to mention the speed of the front three, no matter what front three that Celtic play. Don't know what you think about that in terms of the speed and the movement up front.
Well, I think what it does is give you the option of asking questions of teams. I think you'll get an accurate barometer of just where Celtic are this week, both in the game tomorrow night and the game at Ibrox. And to be honest, over the next few days, there will be all sorts of noise about the COVID issues and who is affected and personnel options. And it will start to build, as we all know, the hype starts to build anyway around these games as the week goes on. But I think if you're in Celtic's camp just now, I think you have to look at last season and you have to look at the games against Rangers and how key they can be into shaping the league campaign. And I think what you have to do is focus purely on your own game, focus on the way that you want the team set up, and you stick to your own principles, and you're not too distracted by what might be going on elsewhere. I think there is a challenge to go to Ibrox and come away with a positive result, and I think that has to be the focus rather than the fact that there will be a lack of players or it might be a bit easier. And to be fair, I don't think that Ange Postecoglou would be distracted by it. I think he's probably long enough in the tooth to know that these games can offer a level of unpredictability purely on the fact that you're walking into a fairly hostile environment. We know that there'll be no Celtic fans at the game, and it can be daunting perhaps for players who haven't been in that situation before. So I think his own mindset will be simply to stick to the game plan and come out of it and then see where you are on the back of it.
Okay, doke. I think we'll call it there for today. So advise everybody to tune in again tomorrow for the countdown to kick off with Alison and Tony. Thanks for joining me, Alison. Cheers.
Thank you for having me.